To another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas. And, today, Billy, we're talking about a hot topic, and with that being fire. But, later on, we're going to cool it down a little bit with some ice. But whether you're dealing with fire or ice, both can be detrimental to your woods.
Yeah, no doubt, Renee. This is an interesting topic for today, given a nice storm that's kind of wiping across Kentucky as we're speaking right now. We have Michael Froelich on here. He's going to be talking about the spring forest fire hazard season here in Kentucky. This is really important information for folks. I know it may not seem like at this moment, but it really is important information. And then we got Matt Springer, going to be talking about some bird-related activities you can do in the winter and our tree of the week. And then Dr. Ellen Crocker, and I'll speak a little bit about some of the ice stuff and what's going to happen and maybe what we can expect down the road as far as a response from Extension.
Right. So I guess let's get started then.
Let's do it. Michael, if you want to pull up your camera and stuff. Good morning, Michael. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. How about you all?
Good.
Great.
Good.
Well, thank you for being on today and talking about fire season.
Just to get started here, my name is Michael Fraley. I'm the Fire Management Chief for the Kentucky Division of Forestry, and we'll be again talking about our spring fire season and a little bit about it. So just to get a little background of it, Kentucky does have a Kentucky fire burn laws that go in effect during our fire seasons. And just to give you a little update about it is the KRS 149 is the state law that gave the overreach authority as related to the Division of Forestry. This law basically is what created the Division of Forestry, as you can see here in KRS 149.010. They hereby create a Division of Forestry to provide for organized forest fire protection and cooperate with federal governments and state departments and landowners across the state here to be able to help protect the forests. Then we also got the KRS 149.360. It's where it declares as a public policy of the Commonwealth is to prevent and control forest fires on threatening the forest land within the Commonwealth to prevent loss of life and damage to the properties. And from that, they also created the KRS 149.400, which outlines our fire seasons, which are during our springtime is one we're going to talk about is February 15th through April 30th. But we also have a fall fire season that starts October 1st and runs through December 15th. So just a little bit about the do's and don'ts of spring fire season and fall fire season, but specifically we'll talk about spring. So again, spring fire season starts here on the 15th and we'll go till April 30th. If you do need to burn any kind of brushland or brush pile on an area, if you're within 150 feet of a woodland or a brushland area, you'll have to wait till after 6 p.m. to burn. Or if you're less than or more than that, you can burn at any time. But if you're going to burn, we always recommend that you call either one of our forestry offices across the state, but also call your local 911 non-emergency dispatch and tell them that you're going to be having some kind of burn going on. But while you're doing that, don't forget to also have the proper items there to help keep the fire from spreading. So make sure you have a rake, a garden hose, a shovel, and stay there until the fire is put out. If the fire does escape, make sure you do call people 911 or call our local forestry offices to come out and help catch it. But there could be a cost related to that if the fire does get out. Again, some do's and don'ts. So again, if you're within 150 feet of a brushland or woodland or a grassland area, you'll have to wait till after 6 p.m. to burn. So do not burn between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. during our fall and spring fire seasons. And the reason for that is higher temperatures during the daytime. You also have higher winds during the daytime, and our humidity outside is lower during the daytime. With all three of those, it causes fires to have a higher intensity and also has more severe to the woodland areas. Also, it's okay to burn if it's after 6 p.m., again, because temperatures are lower, you have lower speed of winds, and the humidity has came back up. So you have a lot better chance of fires not getting away from you. Again, if you are going to burn anything, it's always good to check with your local county on codes that are going on in the county at any time, but also just call Forestry and tell them that you're going to be doing a burn. Division of Forestry has 6 branches, and they're spread out or across the state. As you can see here, Campbellsville branch is more of our central part of the state. Frankfort branch is more of the north central part of the state. Moorhead takes care of more of the northeast corner of the state. Hazard takes care of a little bit of the Kentucky River area of the state. Madisonville basically takes care of the western part of the state, and then Pineville is taking care of mostly the southeast corner of the state. And we also have 2 of our nurseries in the state here, and one is in the West Liberty area of the Moorhead branch, and we also have the John P. Morgan Nursery in Gilbertsville in the Madisonville branch. Division of Forestry personnel that we usually have across the state here. As of right now, we have 120 full-time employees across the state to be able to respond to fires. During fire seasons, we do hire seasonal dozer operators and hand crew leaders, and also engine operators, depending on what area of the state that we have for crew members. So most of our dozers and hand crew leaders are in our eastern 3 branches, so mainly the Moorhead, Hazard, and Pineville branches. But we do have 2 engine operators that work out of our Campbellsville branch. And at any point during our 2 fire seasons, we can roughly have between 215 emergency workers that we hire on as emergency capabilities to be able to take out and put fires out. Here's just a quick historical 10-year spring fire season. As you can see, our highest spring fire season we had was back in 2014, where we had about 1,100 fires and burned between about 3,400 acres. And our low year was probably last spring, where it was pretty wet and stuff, and we only had 213 fires for only a little over 3,800 acres burned. Basically, out of all these fires, about 80% of them are either debris or arson fires across the state that cause most of these fires. We do have about 10-15% of them that are either railroad or natural cause fires in the area. So my best takeaway from this is, I know we're having an ice storm coming through and stuff, so we're going to have a lot more trees down and stuff. So if you are going to try to clean up after the ice storm comes through, just make sure you're following precautions for the spring fire season. And with that, I will open it back up for any kind of questions we got.
Well, thank you very much for that. We greatly appreciate it.
No doubt. Michael, I can't thank you enough for that presentation. I think sometimes people may take fire a little too lightly, and I really appreciate you kind of sharing what you should and shouldn't do, especially during the fire seasons. I think we need to remind folks that, fire can be very dangerous, and not only dangerous to the land and the property, but to the human life as well, especially our firefighters that have to go out and address those. So it's something we want to make sure that we take very seriously. So I really appreciate you sharing that with our audience today.
No problem.
Right now, so far, I don't see any questions, but that doesn't mean people won't think of them. I think you said you'd stick around, and then, we have a question. Why is it this time of year that's fire season?
So the fire seasons were made up because we usually is where the humidity and the temperature start coming up, and the humidity starts dropping because it starts getting a little drier in the air during the time frame. That's just when they found, by watching the fire history of occurrence that happened in the state here, that's when they decide on where we fall into fire seasons.
And I noticed there was a big range. Some of them had one year's had some thousand of fire and over 500, and some years, like last year, was low. Is that depending on rain and weather?
It all depends on the weather we have and stuff. So like this year, they're predicting our February and March to be below normal activity because of the precipitation coming in, but they are calling for April to possibly be a higher, above normal fire activity, because they're looking at not that much precipitation coming in because of El Nino effect.
Okay.
You know, Michael, the fires that we have here in Kentucky are a little bit different than maybe some of the fires people have seen, you know, out west, some of those big, large crown fires, because most of our fires here are typically kind of ground fires a lot, but it's still a lot of damage can happen to trees with those fires as well.
That's 100% correct on that, Billy. Yeah, we really don't get the crown fires you see on big national TV out in California, Washington, Oregon time areas out there. Again, our fires are mainly on the ground. They're burning just the duff layer and stuff. But when we do get into drought conditions, where we get into the duff layer, it starts burning down the duff layer and starts getting into the roots of the trees and it starts killing the trees. It also will get into the cambium layer of a tree where it'll open it up. So like in the springtime, if we have a late spring burn on areas, it can pop the bark on our thin layer trees like maple trees and cause a girdle effect of those trees.
Yeah. I think that's a good point for folks to remember. Just because there was a fire in there and the trees green up doesn't mean there was damage, you know, that's still ongoing to those trees. So it's so important to try to keep those wildfires at bay the best we can.
So long term, what does fire do to trees? It just depends on the intensity of the heat.
It'll depend on the intensity of the heat of the fire and the behavior of the fire around the tree. If it burns year after year in the same spot, it can start causing cat faces, which can get into the tree and start killing the tree. And it also, I believe you guys, the UK, have done a study, and it costs $400 per tree that causes damage to the tree no income coming back to the landowner.
Right, and lost income and potential, right? It really degrades those woods, and it degrades their ability to be of a high quality, because most of the value from a timber perspective is in that bottom 16 foot of a tree, you know, that bottom log, and that's what gets damaged. So, you know, you're damaging the most valuable part of a tree from a timber perspective with our ground fire. So again, just because it greens out the next year doesn't mean there wasn't damage in those woods.
Yep. And there's been studies where they go and they've cut trees down, looked at the cookie of the tree and stuff, and figured out when a fire had gone through some areas and stuff. And they can tell you a lot from just a tree ring of the humidity and the weather program that was around that tree at certain ages.
All right. Well, Michael, again, thank you so much. And thanks for what you do for our folks here across the state of Kentucky and kind of trying to keep us safe from wildfires like that. I mean, you oversee the fire management program here in Kentucky. So again, big thanks to you and all the women and men that work with you to try to help keep us and our woodlands safe. We really appreciate you and the entire Kentucky Division of Forestry.
We did have one more question come in, and it says, why was 2016 such a bad fire season?
Ooh.
So 2016 was a year that we did get into a drought condition, and it caused a lot more fires coming through. And 16, we did have to mobilize all of our KDF employees over to our eastern part of the state to help protect and take care of all the wildfires that had going on. It was the same time frame that Gatlinburg had a lot of their big fires go on and burn up. So it just came down to a lot of weather parameters that came into effect that caused a drought and caused us to have a lot more fires coming through.
Yeah. You know, that brings up an interesting point, talking about Gatlinburg. And I think a lot of the property damage was because folks were really kind of building out in the woods, like out in the Western United States. You know, that's a big part of the problem. They're building in areas that are fire prone. And then, you know, so there are some programs like FireWise and other things, if you do have a home in a woodland setting, that you can implement around your property to try to make sure that it's safe and, I guess, as resilient as possible against forest fires.
Yep. And we do have a FireWise coordinator here in the state that if people want to get in touch with me, I can get them in touch with our coordinator, and they can work with the community to try to make their community more fire resistant as best you can to around structures in their homes and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, you know, if any of our viewers are in areas that are need some FireWise or some fire implementation, just know that there's some support out there that can help you all make good decisions to help keep your community safe. All right, so switching gears a little bit from fire.
Right. So we have Dr. Matt Springer on, and he's going to be talking about bird-related activities for midwinter. And there he is. Do you mind telling us a little bit about your video and what you're going to be talking about?
Sure. Good morning. And so we've got a pretty big event coming up here starting this weekend. It's actually only covers this weekend for Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's called the Great Backyard Bird Count. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And it's also the time of year for those folks that have bird houses to really think about cleaning them out in preparation for the upcoming breeding season. So we're going to kind of cover that a little bit as well.
Good morning. This is Dr. Matt Springer here to talk to you today a little bit about some bird-related activities for midwinter. And the first one, which is a little more time sensitive because it's starting this weekend, is the Great Backyard Bird Count. And what this is it's a 4-day event. So the 12th, February 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. That is a group effort between the Audubon Society, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and Birds Canada to basically have a citizen science project to obtain a snapshot of bird distributions, so species, where species are right now, and their abundance, so their numbers, how many are you seeing in that area. And this helps researchers just get a gauge year in, year out at this time period, where are birds and how many are there? And it helps us track bird populations over time. And this is a really large program. It's on its, I believe this is the 24th year. But last year, there was over 250,000 people that participated in 194 different countries that counted over 27 million birds represented by almost 7,000 different species. So it's a feat that allows a lot of data to come in very quickly. And honestly, it's not asking a lot of folks. It's free. And it basically saying if you've got 15 minutes that you're willing to look outside and see some birds and count some birds in your backyard, and you are able to put that data in by March 1st, we'd love to have it to help us with this effort. So not a whole lot required of you. You can sit there in your house in the warmth and look out your window and see what you see and be able to help science and better manage all of our bird species in the world. Now, how do you participate? What makes it easier to participate? Well, so there's some simple tools that aid you. First, you have to have a means of entering the data into the system that they use. And that can occur using either the Merlin phone app that they have, or an eBird phone app, or an eBird online account. Both of these are free to sign up, free to download on your phone. And the Merlin app actually is basically a field guide for your phone that'll help you identify birds that you're seeing that you are unsure of. So those are great resources, not only because you need to use them for entering data, but also because they help you accomplish identifying the birds. So other things, any kind of paper field guide would be helpful. Although not necessary, binoculars or some kind of optics will help you identify birds, especially if they're further away. The hope is that you're counting these birds in the backyard, your backyard, as the name says, but you can go anywhere and count birds as long as you're able to record the location and let them know where that is. And the full directions to participate are found there at birdcount.org/participate. It gives you the full list of directions because there's some tidbits here that you need to be aware of. Like in particular, they tell you how to count birds at a feeder. So say a lot of folks that have birds in their backyard, they may be feeding those birds. Well, there's a certain way they want you to count those birds when they're using a feeder because they don't want you double counting a lot of birds. So there's directions on how to do that there as well. The other thing that's coming up here is it's about time that you clean out any bird houses that you may have out in your backyard or on your property. And remember that birdhouses are really meant for our cavity nesting birds. It fills that void of maybe not having cavities available to them to nest in on your property. And remember that we've got about 85 different species of cavity nesting birds in North America. And there's really two different groups, the ones that build the cavities themselves, like woodpeckers, and the ones that use the cavities that they find. So you have a bunch of birds that are potentially using your landscape that will benefit from having birdhouses around. So make sure that if we're going to put them out there, that we're managing them correctly. So remember that this is kind of filling a void for for birds and habitat shortages. Sometimes they were caused by us in terms of our logging practices historically, not as much now. But when they were basically clear cutting entire mountainsides at a very large scale, that basically caused them to lose any cavities in the landscape. And wood ducks were a great example of how they dropped, their populations dropped like a rock because there weren't any nesting habitats available. So as I mentioned, it is now a good time to clean those boxes if you have them out, or it's a good time to put them up if you're building them. Pretty basic to do this. It's a good idea to clean them annually, or at the very least, inspect them and just brush out old nest material. Because you're making sure that the nest box is in good shape, it doesn't need any repairs or replacements, and you're able to evict any unwanted inhabitants. And I'm going to talk about that here real quick. Equipment that you need is super basic. You want to have a bucket, some gloves, bleach, water, and some kind of device to scrub out the box. Take it down, open it up carefully because of those potential inhabitants. Remove any material that are in there or evict any unwanted inhabitants. Scrape out that fecal material or gunk. Take that 1 to 9 bleach to water solution, scrub it out, and then make sure you rinse it several times to get that bleach out of that area. Place it in direct sun, let it dry. Once it's completely dry, place it back in that position. Make sure it's in good working order. It's also a good time, we've talked about these unwanted inhabitants, things like squirrels, especially your gray and flying squirrels, rodents. Sometimes if you have larger boxes like wood duck boxes, you may have things like raccoons, mink, or weasels in there. And later in the year, you may have snakes. It's a good time to think about, if you have these guys in these net boxes as you're cleaning it out, you may want to think about putting predator guards up, which will help you limit their access. And there's plans on how to do that found at nestwatch.org. But here's some examples of basically just making it impossible for them to climb up to that entrance to the hole. Other things is if you're, maybe you don't have birdhouses right now, but you're thinking about doing it, you can find out where to get plans to build birdhouses, what birdhouses you may want given your area, and what size birdhouse you need for the species you want to attract. And that can all be found at nestwatch.org. So with that, I'm kind of ran through that really quick, but it's just time to think about it. I want to touch on it right now. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on either the backyard bird count or why and how to clean out your birdhouses.
Well, thanks, Matt. That was really good. That's something I wasn't thinking about for February, is cleaning out the birdhouses that you have.
Yeah, and actually, in some cases, we're a little late. So several of our owl species and raptors have already started nesting. You can sign on to some of the eagle cams now, and a few of them have laid their eggs already. So in those situations, you may need to actually do that box clean out closer to Christmas or even earlier than that.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I never really thought of, snakes and everything. They're eggs in there, so they're probably trying to get after those, right?
Yeah, it's much more common, not at this point in time in the year, obviously, because it's a little cold. We're talking about ice storms. I don't think there's too many black rat snakes flying around the trees right now. But if you are going to check, boxes at any point in the spring or summer, there's possibility that there's things in there other than birds. Obviously, cautious about wasps, yellow jackets, any kind of stinging insect. But I've opened boxes and had weasels come pop out.
Wow.
Oh.
And a lot, sometimes they're like cute things, like you open a wood duck box and there's a screech owl in there, which is great. They don't like to be woken up, but it's a lot better than a weasel. And other times, you may have a raccoon that's staring back at you from a foot away. So
give you a little start, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh yes, definitely peek in before you open all the way.
We did get a question in, Matt. It says, should birdhouse openings face east?
Well, so I guess the best thing to do is when look at those directions. So that website about building birdhouses, it has directions for specific birdhouses for each species. And there's sometimes directions on how you should face them. So for example, like bluebird nest boxes, you want to be facing them towards the openings of fields to increase usage. So not necessarily cardinal directions, but potentially directions related to habitat features surrounding that area. And I see another question there about bats.
Yep.
Yes, it's possible. So be careful. And that might be one that if you have bats in there because of the status of bats and how they're basically their populations are crashing, you may want to just let that house be and for the year and maybe try to clean it out later in the spring, as we tend to want to leave bats alone for sure.
Yeah.
Rabies risk is another reason to leave them alone.
Yeah. But they also do a lot of good things for the environment and us as well, for sure.
And then, yes, Lori, thank you for putting that up. The Project Nest Watch, Right House for the Right Bird, is an important part. And there's a lot of citizen science projects related to birds and birding and bird houses and bird feeding and Christmas bird counts and you name it. They exist. And it's a great way of engaging with the outdoors.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Excellent.
Oh, someone also said you can make a great 4-H project, which is
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Contact Lori Thomas.
Contact Lori for that.
Yeah.
She's the one that mentioned it and is definitely has some great programs there. I don't know, Lori, if you want to mention
Speaking
them.
of Lori.
No, I was going to say it is both Project Feeder Watch and Nest Watch, or one in services that we've done Feeder Watch before with 4-H agents, but they do make good club projects. Right now I know we're virtual, but once we get back together again, we had several counties that set up feeding stations at their offices, and it became a whole project, a monthly thing with their group. So it can be a good project as well as the nest boxes. So good job, Matt. Thanks for sharing that, and hopefully get out and look at birds this weekend. So although it's going to be bad weather.
I don't know about this weekend. Maybe next.
No.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. We appreciate that. All right. Well, moving on. We already have Lori on here, so let's go ahead and do our tree of the week.
All right. So this week I picked another tree that's got, I think, good winter appeal. We don't have leaves on the tree right now, so I've been trying to pick out trees that have something interesting besides their leaves. And so we've picked American hornbeam, and this is one of our smaller understory trees, but it's really unique. It has some unique characteristics for sure. So we'll go ahead and let me share this. I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the American hornbeam. American hornbeam, Carpinus carolinian, is a member of the birch family and one of 35 species in the genus, which is found only in the northern hemisphere. It is also called blue beech, ironwood, and musclewood. American hornbeam is a small, slow-growing, short-lived tree in the understory of the eastern mixed hardwood forest. It typically grows 20 to 40 feet tall and typically only grows about 1 foot per year. The short, often crooked trunk is characteristically ridged, resembling the muscles of a flexed arm. American hornbeam is native to most of the eastern United States and extends into Canada. It is also found in central and southern Mexico, Guatemala, and western Honduras. American hornbeam grows best on rich, mesic, or moist sites, but can also tolerate drier, less productive sites and soils. It is usually found in bottomland mixed hardwood forest, but can also occur in dry, moist upland hardwood forest. It is typically an understory tree, rarely occurring as an overstory tree, and it is very shade tolerant, especially as a seedling. The leaves of American hornbeam are deciduous and alternately arranged on the twig. The simple leaves are elliptical to egg-shaped and about 3 to 5 inches long. The leaves have pinnately arranged veins, and the margins are doubly serrated. They are green above and pale below. Fall color can be attractive, and the color ranges from yellow to a scarlet tinge. This species is monoecious, which means one house, and that means that a tree has both male and female flowers on the same tree. The flowers are catkins, and both male and female flowers emerge when the leaves come out. The male catkins are green to brown, about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches long. The female catkins are yellow-green and somewhat fuzzy, about 2 to 3 inches long, with a 3-lobed bract, which is a modified leaf subtending a flower. The flowers bloom in mid to late spring, and the flowers are wind-pollinated. The fruit is a small, ribbed nutlet that is attached to the 3-lobed leafy bract. The bract resembles a maple leaf. The bracts and nutlets are clustered on 4 to 6 inch hanging stalks. The fruit ripens in late summer to early fall, and the seeds are primarily dispersed by birds but can also be dispersed short distances by wind. Trees begin seed production around 15 years of age, with best production between 25 and 50 years. Trees produce large seed crops about every 3 to 5 years. The bark of the American hornbeam resembles American beech, thus the name blue beech. It is smooth gray to bluish gray with a little change throughout its life, as you'll notice in the photos. The trunk is fluted or ridged, which gives the tree a muscular appearance, also its other name, musclewood. The wood of American hornbeam is tough, dense, and heavy. The sapwood is nearly white and thick, and trees have little heartwood, which tends to be a pale yellowish brown. American hornbeam is rated as non-durable to perishable in decay resistance. It is not of significant economic importance due to its size. American hornbeam is considered as secondary in importance to wildlife, except for being an important food source for gray squirrels in southern bottomland hardwood forest. The seeds and buds are eaten by ruffed grouse, ringneck pheasant, and northern bobwhite. Yellow-rumped warblers also eat the seeds. Mammals such as rabbits, fox squirrels eat the seeds and the bark, and it's heavily used by beaver. American hornbeam wood isn't widely used, but it has been used for tool handles, levers, wedges, golf club heads, and mallets. The orange and scarlet coloration in the fall make this an attractive ornamental tree, but it can be difficult to transplant. It is recommended to be transplanted in the spring as balled and burlapped. The national champion American hornbeam is in Essex, New Jersey, and there wasn't a photo available for this tree. It's 181 inches in circumference, 55 feet tall, with a 75-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion American hornbeam is in Franklin County in the Frankfort Cemetery. It's 69 inches in circumference, 40 feet tall, with a 47-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest Champion Trees or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about American hornbeam. American hornbeam nuts are edible, but since they are so small, they are seldom used. The extremely hard wood of this tree lends to the common name of ironwood. Musclewood, another common name, comes from the fluted ridged trunk that resembles a flexed muscle. The wood, as the common name suggests, takes on a horn-like polish and was once used by early Americans to make bowls, tool handles, and ox yokes. Native Americans used the bark to make a variety of medicines. The scientific genus name Carpinus is the Latin common name for the hornbeam, and the species name Carolinian means from Carolina. Thanks for joining me to learn about the American hornbeam. I hope you get a chance to get out into your woodlands, a local park, or neighborhood and enjoy this unique American tree.
Remind people that if they have a question to type them in the chat pod. But Lori, I really enjoy those every week, and I actually look forward to the fun facts at the end. I keep going, okay, what's the fun fact this week? It's always really neat. I like it. So what are some characteristics to ID this tree?
Well, obviously the fluted or ridged trunk, and that even extends up into the branches. That is a super identifying characteristic, along with that really smooth kind of slate gray, blue, gray bark. So you're walking through the woods, that would be an easy one. But say maybe you can't see the trunk, it's obscured. Another good ID characteristic are the flowers and the fruit, because they're on that, they have that little leafy bract that looks like a little tiny maple leaf. And so that'll be dangling down. You've got, about 4 to 6 inches long, and they're clustered on there. So those stand out really nice, from flowering once flowers come out in spring, and then you've got until your seeds are, dispersed into late fall. So those are, to me, I think are the best characteristics. The leaves aren't, they look like a lot of, they look like a lot of our birch leaves, it's in the birch family. So it's not as characteristic. So definitely find that ridged fluted trunk, and you'll know you've got an American hornbeam.
Yeah, I think if I saw that muscle-like thing, I would be like, oh, that's what that is.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you again for doing this. I greatly appreciate it.
Excellent.
Yeah. Good job, Laurie. Appreciate you.
All right. Well, moving on, we can't just ignore what's going on outside, right? So a lot of ice getting, hitting our country and Kentucky actually, and also snow. So Ellen said that she could tell us a little bit more about some of these items that we might need to pay attention to.
Yes, great. So we just hear from the woods today. Hope everyone is being safe and that hopefully the storm doesn't amount to what it's supposed to. We got a little bit of ice already, but we wanted to call everyone's attention to a resource that's available from the National Weather Service. If you haven't already, this is just a really great thing to check out and perhaps to share. So they have some great resources on their website, which is weather.gov. And if you haven't looked at this lately, or another great resource regarding the weather, I would, because we have some weather headed our day,
Unfortunately,
our way in the
yeah.
next few days.
Yeah.
So if you check out their website, you'll see this map that's impacting our region. And they actually produced some slides that are available of kind of what we can expect or what we should prepare for in case it happens. So over the next few days, we're looking at the potential throughout much of our state for significant ice accumulation. And they give some kind of bands there in terms of what that might look like and how much ice we could expect. In particular, some areas are also going to get some snow, some ice, and some of that ice could be, quite a bit, up to maybe half an inch, depending on where you're located. So just to keep in mind that this is likely going to be really hitting into today and this evening and tomorrow as well. So if you haven't already checked that out, please do. Again, that website is weather.gov. And leading up to this, just want you all to be safe and be aware of that. But, ice storms have potential to damage a lot of different things, and trees are among them. So whether these are the trees in your yard, the potential of those trees to impact power supply, to damage property, or the trees in your woods. So we're going to see what happens and make resources available to you all related to ice damage, especially if that ends up being the case. When ice storms hit your woods and hit your trees, there's the immediate hazards that they cause. Really important to be cautious, to take care and be aware of those hazards. There's also long-term damage that can come to the health of those trees from those ice storms, whether it's, killing the crown of the tree and impacting its form, providing great entry points for decay fungi. We talked about fire earlier. Ice storm is another way that a lot of those fungi will get into, in this case, the canopy of trees and cause problems down the road. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and what you might expect to see, as well as some resources available to help landowners with dealing with that. And Billy, did you want to mention some things as well?
Well, I was just going to say, thanks for sharing this. And, we don't really know how severe this is going to be, but it does have the potential, it looks like, to be pretty heavily damaging in some areas of the state. So, I just would reiterate what Ellen said, safety first, right? Your health and safety should be the first priority above all. And then, we can assess the woods after that. I would say, we typically see more damage on north-facing slopes in those areas that don't get as much sun. They can usually get higher accumulations, and you'll see more with probably some of your pines and other trees that have needles on them now, because they'll just be able to absorb a lot more ice and a lot more weight. So we expect some damage certainly on some of our conifers out there, and some of those areas that are a little more protected from the sun, they'll probably have more severe damage. So I would say safety first, but once we kind of see what happens, we'll be sharing some resources with you all to let you know kind of how to respond. And ultimately, if you do have some damage in your woods, it'll benefit you from getting a professional forester out there to assess the situation and kind of see what you need to do. It may be a salvage harvest that you need to do, or it may just be a little cleanup that you need to do. But there may be some programs that are available, just depending on the severity of it. But we just kind of see what's going to happen, and then we'll be responsive to that. But Ellen, thank you for bringing up those resources. And again, we just urge everybody to be safe over the next few days, not only when you're out there driving, but certainly if you happen to be outside or in your woods.
Billy, one question I wondered, right now we're having the ice storm, so we can't do this now, but is there anything people could do to help so that if we were to have an ice storm later, once it kind of clears up a little bit and they're safe to be able to do so, can they do anything to?
You know, that's a great question, Renee. And I would say, and Ellen, you can chime in too as well, but I think the best way to prepare your woods for whether it's ice storm damage or any other kind of threats is to make sure they're as healthy as possible, right? So we want those woods to be just as vibrant and vigorous, growing and healthy as possible. And that's going to give them the best protections to respond to whatever stressors that come their way. So, you know, taking care of your woods and making sure they're in good shape. You know, if you've got an issue with invasive species in your property, this ice storm can really kind of make that worse because it can open up the ground to additional sunlight and allow them to respond. So, you know, controlling those invasives on an ongoing basis can make your woods more resilient for these. But again, you know, that's why it's so important to kind of work with a professional out there on your unique property and your situation to make sure that you're doing things to keep it as healthy as possible.
And
And
speaking of some great professionals, I've seen some county extension offices across the state having fantastic information related to this. For those of you watching today, if you haven't yet, make sure to check out the information from your county extension office related to the ice storm, but really anything. They are a great resource.
And Ellen, I was going to ask you, you know, there might be some invasives that pop up that they normally didn't have if some of the trees do fall down and leave some of the openings. So is there some place that they can go to see what kind of invasives they can look and see what they have in their land?
Well, definitely, we've got lots of resources about what invasive plants you might have. And, you know, ice storms are a natural event in some ways. You know, our trees, our native trees that are from here, they don't happen periodically. They can be very destructive. But the reason why it's a problem for invasives is that if you lose some of that canopy, any disturbance, whether it's natural or us going in there and having a harvest, is typically a good entry point for invasive plants to be taking off and spreading. If they're already in your woods, then they can spread out from there because they can take advantage of that opportunity. So we'll provide more information on scouting for invasive plants. And we had a segment previously on spring invasives to watch for, but we'll continue to provide some of that throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, Ellen. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Stay safe, everyone.
Yes, indeed. Safety first.
And again, remember that any show that we have, and the one that Ellen was just talking about, you can go to fromthewoodstoday.com and you can watch those and see anything, any segments that we've done. We also have a YouTube channel. You can Google UK Forestry Extension on YouTube, and you can see all of our shows there too, as well as just individual segments. So.
Another great show, Renee. And again, if you all have thoughts on additional topics you'd like to see covered, let us know. We have a little survey link on fromthewoodstoday.com and you can check it out there. But thank you all for being with us, whether you're on us with Facebook Live or on Zoom or you're watching a recording. We're really glad to have you with us, and please help us spread the word.
Definitely. But until then, we'll see you next week, next Wednesday at 11 o'clock. So take care.
Take care. Be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.